Last week we saw the new miniature reveals live from the World Championships of Warhammer. Now I'm late to the party, which means you probably saw everything already, so I'm not going to bore you with details about every single release. But oh boy, did we get some awesome minis, and on top of that, there have been some major changes in direction associated with these releases that were really surprising. I'm just kidding. There has been some innovation in both the sculpting direction and the painting the Eavy Metal team presented to us, and a couple of other changes that came out of left field for me, because it really means a few things that seemed unchangeable policy with Games Workshop up until now did shift. And that has some interesting implications for the future and direction of Warhammer minis, in my opinion. Let's start with the 40k releases and a few more obvious things. Titus is now the captain of the Ultramarine 2nd Company, and this is obviously a way to tie in the mainstream success of Space Marine 2 with the miniatures game, and a push to bring more people to Warhammer through a familiar and beloved character. And we just had a Lieutenant Titus promo mini that wasn't particularly well received, mainly for the somewhat awkward pose. And now we get yet another version with significantly more details, obviously donning a cloak and the typical Terrouge yoinked straight from Roman armor. But an interesting detail is the new way they did the fur. Instead of these deep cuts that often characterize Games Workshop fur, we get a few defined strains, very shallow and more implied recesses, and I haven't made up my mind yet if that looks better, but it certainly leaves more room for interpretation, using your own brush strokes and being less boxed in by the sculpt. That said, I know why Games Workshop does their fur the way they do it. Obviously, it's easier for beginners to give it a base color and a wash and have a somewhat decent result right away. But I like that they are at least experimenting with new approaches. Some people complained that the new Titus is just a Urkin the Dark Warden commemorative figure reskinned into a Space Marine. But I mean, there's only so many poses you can do around swords that are rested on the ground, and ultimately, does it even matter? Titus comes with a new command squad, the Wardens of Ultramar, and we see two more characters from Space Marine 2 and the secret level episode shoehorned in. Valorum Godriel gets the role of Ancient, and Metaros joins as a veteran sergeant with shield. And there's a bunch of human characters added. All of this gives me Company Heroes vibes, and the human minis look very cool. And I can see these work in a lot of kit bashes and conversions. But as far as the game goes, it will be interesting to see what mechanics these will bring to the table, being just normal humans in a Space Marine army. Titus is tasked with battling Necrosaur Amentar and to defend the 500 worlds of Ultramar, which is chosen as a new old narrative setting for Warhammer 40k and explains why we got a lot of Ultramarines released recently. Since Necrons are my second favorite faction in the 40k universe, I'm happy that we get yet another mini. And now we're also getting into some of these more exciting developments. Amentar is said to be the origin of the Destroyer curse. I like that we, at least in some way, go back to the destroy all life trope that the Necrons originally oozed. And Amentar looks the part too. I really like what we have going on here in the paint job, and I think this is going to set the tone for the rest of the video. It feels like someone unleashed the Eavy Metal team, or at least took a few restraints away from them. Like on the giant shoulder area, normally we would get these rather uniform metallic surfaces, stained with a wash or two, and then edge highlights. And while we retain the edge highlights, there's a lot going on in these surfaces. We see traces of different colors, like turquoise, but also purple and beige tones. There's also a deliberate effort to shade certain parts the way we see it normally done on non-metallic metal, where you have darker areas next to bright ones, like on the shoulders here, and also the temples of the head, and generally playing with reflective parts against more matte and muted areas. There's a lot of texture going on. There's fine lines and scratches all over these surfaces. All of these body parts look more textured and interesting, where usually they would throw on black, do edge highlights and call it a day. The face blades look like they received some extra care in their rendering, like there's some glaring apex highlights, and the gradients look more sophisticated. And then we have the tips of the claws covered in a mist of blood, and it's not just blobs of red. No, it's very intricate, incredible splatter patterns. And last but not least, we get some OSL. Like there's a glow radiating from the orbs and the eyes, and also the bright connectors between the vertebrae. I don't remember that being a thing ever on a box art, but maybe I'm wrong. You can let me know. Again, it looks like the Heavy Metal team was allowed to level up their game. And speaking about leveling up and the introduction of new things, we also get to see non-metallic metal used again, I shall say, on the Nightbringer. Because back in the days, the original Nightbringer sculpt was indeed painted in this chrome non-metallic metal that collectively blew our minds in the early 2000s. We do get another glimpse of the new Nightbringer model, as bringing back a bunch of Catans would probably help with the quest to destroy all life, and someone else in the Heavy Metal team was again told to just go wild with this one. As we see non-metallic metal applied probably as a nod back to the old paint job. It's intriguing how some areas of the cloak he is covered in also turn into these metal colors where they meet with the parts of the body, and then a lot of the ambience is reflecting in the metal, like the green from the lightning and also the purple from the inside of the cloak. Generally, this is a very balanced color scheme and technically well executed, with the necessary care put into the gradients to really make this look like light is reflecting on all the surfaces. And continuing with this path of innovation, it really feels we are entering a new area of miniature design at Games Workshop with the new Warhammer Quest. The heroes cover a lot of the tropes also included in the last Warhammer Quest: Cursed City, like a highborn noble, a sword fighter, a priest, a sorcerer, dwarf, fancy elven archer, and big burly man. And while the Cursed City characters were good, don't get me wrong, it feels like this is at least a level above, both when it comes to detail and character design. Edmark Valoran has to be my favorite of the bunch, featuring a super dynamic pose. The detail looks practical and not artificially crammed in because we can. I mean, sure, there's a lot of detail on this guy, but all serves a purpose, like the manticore wings and head on the helmet signifies his status and theme. Same for the lion on the shield. The axe is clearly that of a noble, but looks crisp and not unnecessarily detailed. The armor is straightforward and the cloak gives a clear sense of direction and movement. I also like the wavy patterns of the cloth tied into the helmet. And let's not forget, all of these minis are push fit. Here's a couple of female faces I don't hate. That's a new experience for me. And Inara Sion in particular is such a great example for a minimalistic character design that still looks impressive. It has all the elegance of a Don Bluth movie, the dynamic dress, the subtle step her feet are taking, and the liquid swirling around the sword. Also dwarf. A generic elfin archer character B is, in my opinion, saved because he is basically a centaur and the dynamic body just works so well. I guess I only wished he didn't step on that tiny stone back there, but of course we first need to see more angles. Drescher is a cool druid concept, and my least favorite character is Jacobus Vine. Wine, because vines, get it? For some reason, I don't think he's as sophisticated as the other sculpts, but hey, overall, really big W by Games Workshop. And while the old Cursed City villains, especially the skeleton warriors, also marked a very cool aesthetic shift in my book, and even with the hero minis being awesome overall, the Nurgle minis in this box really are the stars of the show. The main antagonist of the setting is Gelgus Post, Prince of Swords. So while this is not my favorite character out of the bunch, there's a few trends we can already see in this one. The sculpts are moving into what seems like a more serious direction. Just compare this to the Sloppity Bile Piper, the Poxbringer, or even Horticular Slimeox. Even the Lord of Blights, one of my all-time favorite Nurgle models, looks tame when we compare it to the more body horror focused and menacing, almost brutal nature of this sculpt. The left arm is bloated and deformed, and so is the face. Its features stretched into a grimace, and it's a face that says, "I'll make floor paste out of you." The armor isn't just scales and plates slapped on top of bloated bodies. Rather, the bloating bodies are deforming the armor and it breaks open under the physical stress and decay. And there's a lot more nuance in the skin tones. It really looks like rotting flesh, especially with these discolorations around the broken armor parts. Really creepy. And in a way, this doesn't really look like the heavy metal style we know. All the volumes on the arm, every little bulge is defined, and not just with edge highlights. We don't even get the lines we would expect on the upper parts of the fingers, but instead they are clearly defined volumes. There's also bounce lights on these bigger volumes, like the bloated breast part up here, and again, these are push fit models. How? With the green armor parts, they have been moving away from solid greens to a metallic base with washes on top, which obviously results in a more nuanced finish. And of course, it also contributes to the less cartoony appearance. I also like the slightly different rust tones, like they feel more reddish than usual, but also with a lot more nuance. In fact, all the metallics look a lot more refined and nuanced. The only thing I'm not super fond of is the spikes coming out of his neck. It's almost like he ate the porcupine that wants to come back out. Belga, the cyst witch, is another crazy character. Her lower body morphing into this maggot-like appendix, and all the additional body parts and whole upper bodies melted together, like there's a whole other person on the cape stirring the pot. And as far as the painting goes, I don't know if we ever saw orbs that were this defined. Out of the bunch, Malgot was the one that caught my attention the most. Again, we get this different sculpting style where shapes like the arm used to be super blocky. They now feel a lot more organic, and the more volumetric approach to painting just makes this even more pronounced. The fly on the chest looks like it's part of the armor, almost like it was hammered into the armor and not added on later. The whole silhouette looks a lot more brutal, and the character looks super menacing. A Shaman Foulhoof doesn't blow me away on first sight the way the other three do, but there's only so much you can work with when it comes to the Beastman trope, in my opinion. So moving on to the rest of the box, yes, there's a lot more to come, and it's all pretty bonkers in my opinion. The Cankerborn beings born out of demonic entities, born from war-torn soils, still carrying chunks of earth and stone with them, and unlike the zombie from the Cursed City box, here it feels a lot more natural. The greatest thing about these has to be the three heads melted together though. Maybe you can do all three of them in slightly different colors when you paint them, but they just look really awesome. The Blight Templars I'm definitely going to use as putrid Blight Kings. Some of these minis feel intriguingly stylized, the bloated upper bodies held up by comparably tiny legs and feet, weapons infested with parasitic entities, or just parts of flesh and tissue. A lot of this gives me Darkest Dungeon vibes. The Pox Wretches are nothing spectacular, but I suppose having some of these to mix into Poxwalkers will definitely be cool. We're also getting new Pestigors, but I gotta say, I think I like these the least out of the box, and I can't even point my finger to what exactly I don't like about these, but I guess compared to the rest of the box, they might just be a little underwhelming. Luckily, we do get two versions of almost everything in this box, since the whole Maggotkin faction is getting a refresh. I guess this one is my favorite out of the whole bunch, and then there's also these two. Ultimately, I guess there's only so many ways to make intriguing zombie goats. Next up, we have the Rot Swords. I guess this would be Papa Nurgle's equivalent to Chaos Warriors. And unlike that, we get a bit of a different troop type here. Not a lot of exposed and rotten flesh, and the focus lying more on the armor designs. I like these outward bent shields and all the small details like cracks in the armor or this plate falling off halfway, and really all the ways to make a very similar armor look distinguished among a number of these troops, so they don't all look the same. The putrid Blight Kings are basically changing into mountains of bloated flesh, and I'm a bit ambivalent about it. I like how these are executed. So basically the bloated bodies and the large chunky weapons and huge plates of armor. So in a way, I like how the new theme is executed. For example, that one duel with the giant axe, it's a badass mini. I like most of their poses in general, but I don't know about the theme to begin with, and them basically being giant cloth racks. I guess they can't fit into their armors anymore, and they're using the drapes to cover up. Also, I'm not super fond of every mini in this army now having some form of antlers grow from their heads. Now, overall, I'm probably going to use some of these minis. I'm glad, however, that I still have some of the old Putrid Blight Kings left over, so I can mix and match the elements I like on both kits. As far as the painting goes, we're getting a bit of a mixed bag. Absolutely gorgeous skin tones, especially with the variety of different base skin colors. And then most of these are defined more volumetric too. And the rusty weapons are top notch, but all of the clothes and the bands are mostly edge highlighted and washed again. A slight exception here on this guy maybe. I also want to talk about the Sloven Knights. Again, these are somewhat cool, but also suffer from basically being walking pieces of cloth. And I guess this somehow started with the Harbinger of Decay, but that was a mysteriously hooded figure for a reason, and not the whole horse being covered in cloth. So yeah, I'm a little torn. Again, the paint jobs give me mixed signals. For example, on this guy with the cloth draped around his neck, we get some more volumetric highlights where everything facing up. So all the big areas of the drapes are bright instead of just the edges. But then on the green-black cloth on the horse, it's mainly edge highlights again. We also got a new giant Festus. I do like most of what is going on, starting with the platform and up. I'm not a fan of the slug, or is it a leech? But that's just me. And I can see painting him without his mount, maybe sitting on some kind of throne or switching the leech for something else. But yeah, great character to begin with, and I like this new version a lot. So again, we did see a couple of trends here. Games Workshop trying to use the momentum Space Marine 2 created to promote 40k by making Titus a main character in their new narrative campaign. A genius move. I would have done the same. Whoever had this idea, I hope he got a promotion. Second, we see a lot of development in their miniature design, especially with these Warhammer Quest minis and some of the new Maggotkin. And more intricate, more natural looking features. And we definitely see a lot of the heavy metal team unleashing their true power with a lot of these box arts. Let's hope this trend continues, and maybe this will push some more people into wanting to try and grow as a painter. I would be really happy about that. Let me know what you think about these new minis and which one you like best. And thanks for watching me ramble about some awesome minis for 20 minutes, and see you next time.